first of all, for the audience, this is Sucharit Bhakdi, a well-renowned professor. I think you can give your introduction about what you've done, and it's easily seen when you look at the book. Professor or retired professor from the University of Mainz, who has stood out in Germany from very early on as a contrarian in the entire argument about what should be done about the coronavirus. First of all, I should admit to you that very early on in March, my expertise is Chinese studies, and I quite vociferously advocated for a lockdown. So you might be disapproving of that, I'm sure.
No,
But
March was all right.
As I observed the processes going on, in particular, I observed the debates in Germany, your own ideas, Wolfgang Wodark's ideas and others, and also the evidence from Puschel and Streeck. Sure. I came round to, and also the madness of the policies that have been carried out in Britain, I came round to your opinion, and I bought your book with the intention of finding anything that I could find wrong with it. And I must admit, at the moment, I have not done that. So I'd like you to just explain, first of all, what the purpose of the book is and what your overall viewpoint is.
Well, the purpose of the book was to inform the general public about what has been going on here, because we realized very early on, actually 6 months ago, that something was not right about the whole situation, beginning from the diagnostic procedure, registering the cases, the fatalities. Everything was being done wrongly, and in a highly misleading fashion, such that the whole world believed what people were telling them, people being the elite. And this was so unbearable to us that we stood up to try to rectify the situation. With little avail, I have to say. So the first videos we made were the end of March, end of March. And we went on in April to make a couple more because the situation was getting worse rather than better in April. And then came May, where the situation became ridiculous because the epidemic in Europe had obviously already come to an end, and yet the politicians and the experts responsible for all of this kept on panic mongering, fear, spreading fear into the hearts and souls of everyone here, so that even people with a good education, highly intelligent colleagues of ours were convinced that this was the case. This could not be. And then, my wife, Karina, the author of this book, she felt seriously ill. She was getting depressed. She had she couldn't sleep. Her mother was also seriously ill and afflicted by this whole stupid crisis, forced to wear a mask, collapsed in a supermarket because of the mask, almost died, in fact. And so we were really in a very, very bad situation. And the only way to relieve ourselves of this terrible burden that was on our mind was to write this book. Okay. That's what happened.
Can I go into some of the substance? Because that, of course, is a personal story, which I fully concur with. But at the same time, it returns then to the question in a lot of people's minds who'll be watching this or have heard all the arguments. Sure. It returns to some fundamental substance issues which you deal with in your book. Just maybe a couple of them, perhaps you can touch on here. What is an infection? As opposed to a case?
Yes, an infection is the entry of an agent, bacterium, virus, or parasite into the body and its multiplication in the body. No more, no more, and no less. But infection does not mean that you have fallen ill. If you fall ill, it's an infectious disease, it's an illness. And this has been something, a definition that has been broken, violated by the WHO, who declared that anyone who tested positive with this so-called PCR test was to be classified as a COVID-19 case.
Yeah.
COVID-19 is the name given to a severe illness. So this was absolutely impossible, you know.
Yeah, and so today they've got an article in the Guardian newspaper where they say COVID cases 80% asymptomatic in the UK. Present study has just released today.
I'm so happy to hear that.
I just wanted to ask you, because this has come up again and again and again, and it's one of the last remaining bastion arguments they've got, and that is asymptomatic transmission.
Oh,
what do you think of that?
There is no scientific basis for that statement, because in order to be able to state this, you would have to have asymptomatic people. You would have to show that they have spread the infection to someone else. Now, how could anyone have done that? The answer is no one, because, you know, for that, you would have to have the scenario that you knew someone was asymptomatic but infected. This meaning that they must have had a positive PCR test. Then you would have to go and see whether anyone had been infected by that individual.
Yeah.
And this has never been done. In fact, even the experiment showing that someone who has tested positive with this damned PCR test what could infect cells in culture has never been shown.
Is that right?
Yes. Do you know what this means? You see, the PCR test has never been given the green light for diagnostic purposes. Never.
This particular PCR test, you mean? Because I saw
no. Generally, a PCR test. This particular one in particular, there are PCR tests that can be used for diagnosis, but they have to be validated. They have to be, standardized. PCR test. I like to give this as an example because it seems to be understood by everyone. If you drink 1 milliliter of whiskey, you're not drunk. If you drink 100 milliliters of whiskey, I will get drunk. Okay, now both of us go drive the car and get into a traffic control police. So they test you with, in German we have this breath test. I don't know whether they have it in England too.
Yeah.
Blow. So that breath test will say, okay, you have drunk 1 milliliter, so you can go on driving.
Yeah.
I drank 100, so I'm stopped and I have to give up my license. All right. Now this PCR test can be likened to something that is, measuring the alcohol. But the thing is this, if you have drunk 100 milliliters, let's say you have 100 viruses, that is the infectious doses that you need to infect another person, all right? If you have one
virus, or you're saying that's an example?
An example. Let us say...
Is it known what that is?
Oh, yes. Approximately, yes. Very approximately. But the order of magnitude is there, especially for the infection of cells, let's say, culture. And then what happens is that you put this in a black box. This is a PCR instrument, and you press a button, and then every minute you double the number. All right. So if you have 100 cents, oh my gosh, I'm in Germany now, so we have the euro. 100 cents, sorry. And you press that button for 10 minutes, then you end up with 1 million euros.
Yep.
Bingo, give up your license because you had 100.
Yep.
If you have one and you press it for 10 minutes, you got 10,000 euros.
Yep.
So keep on driving.
Yep. Yep.
But if you keep that button pressed another 7 minutes, then those 10,000 euros become 1 million euros.
Right.
So depending on how long you press that button, you can, magnify that 1 cent to become 1 million or not. And the trouble about this PCR test is that it's not been standardized so that the button is only kept pressed 10 minutes and not any longer.
Yeah.
In fact, they always keep it pressed longer, so that even if you don't have an infectious dosis, you have only one virus or you have a part of the virus, it gets multiplied such that your test is positive. And then you're forced to go into quarantine. And then the WHO said that's the next COVID-19 case.
Mm-hmm. So it seems to me, from what you've been arguing, that that the PCR test, if it does anything, or if it is to be able to do anything, it should be able to distinguish between parts of a broken or ruins of a broken virus or a dead virus, an active virus that can infect you, an active virus that can't infect you, maybe, and something else, false data. Is that right? Is that the divisions that would exist?
Yes, an active virus that can infect you should be defined as a positive test. And that has not been done. All right, that has not been done.
Is there, in theory, a way of doing that?
Yes, in theory, you could reduce the time you press that button down to 10 minutes, all right? And this can be adjusted, and it has not been done. This should have been done, right from the beginning. And then the test might have been used as an aid to diagnose the disease, but not as the sole instrument to diagnose the disease.
So
now,
a doctor's observation of the patient and perhaps a chest X-ray, that sort of thing.
It's the doctor's damn duty to look at the patient and not to look at a scrap of paper with plus minus, and that is the terrible thing, that this scrap of paper with just plus minus, which is in itself not genuine, not verified, has been used to plunge the whole world in a mess.
I saw you refer to the Tübingen study on T-cell immunity. I've tried to explain that to people, but is it possible, therefore, perhaps to examine the scale of T-cell immunity within society, and perhaps to do a T-cell test rather than a PCR test if people want to identify whether they have such a propensity to get the disease?
But first of all, when you do medicine, you always have to ask yourself about the appropriateness of anything you do, whether it's diagnostics or therapy. And if you go around looking sort of with a microscope to find something that might be there or might not be there, that is actually irrelevant, you're wasting all your time and energy and money. And this society cannot afford to do so. There are much more important things to look at than to look at the T-cell immunity, because it's already known from the Tübingen study and from study of other labs, there have been other studies as well that are saying the same thing, that there's a high level of background T-cell immunity, all right, stemming from the past, from the struggle of the immune system with the old coronaviruses that are all over the place. Now, one last thing, and then I'm finished. You see, these studies have been studies looking at the T lymphocytes in the blood of blood donors, right? What people don't know is that the bulk of your lymphocytes are not residing in the blood. They reside in the spleen and the lymph nodes. In fact, over 90% are in the spleen and lymph nodes. So if in the blood, already 80% of the populace has T lymphocytes that react, then you can bet your life that the other 20% who were negative have those lymphocytes in their spleen or lymph node. Okay, they just didn't happen to be there when the blood was taken.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
So it's no.
So it could be much higher, you're saying?
Of course,
Right.
I'm sure it is.
Okay. Okay.
I think it's going on 100%.
I don't know if you saw the article in The Lancet a few days ago by Richard Horton, and he said provokingly, this is not a pandemic. He said it's a syndemic. He said people are coming down and dying who have ailments that can be treated relatively cheaply, but who have not been treated adequately. For example, cancer and heart disease and so on. And that these are connected with socio-economic conditions. And therefore, it's these that need to be treated. That's what he says.
I've not seen that paper, but I'm so glad that the Lancet publishes a good paper once in a while.
Yeah. And there seem to be some critical voices emerging from that sphere. What I was wondering, because if you read your book, the primary focus is on Germany, and I've seen your discussions in Austria and so on Service TV over the last few weeks. But people in Britain might turn around and say, or in America or in France or in Spain, look at the numbers who died here. It's not like Germany. For whatever reason, Germany has come out better, as has Greece, as has Thailand, as has many countries. How do you try and calculate that? And what would you say to those who say that's not what happened in Britain? We had 65,000 extra deaths.
All right. Now, the first thing is that the Brits are just as, what shall I say? What is the right word for this?
Können Sie in Deutsch sagen?
Uncritical as everyone else.
Yeah.
And the British don't live up to their name of being a bit more thoughtful, a bit more intelligent,
critically minded,
and because the Brits have a better school education, I suppose, or had once upon a time than the rest of the world. The British have been the real leaders of thought. I think the British have the highest number of Nobel Prize winners per population, I think, per capita than any other country, because you've simply got the most intelligent and most educated people. But why? Have you stopped this? I don't understand. Why, of all people, were you among those who accepted this really absolutely impossible way of registering a COVID-19 victim as any person who died of anything with a positive PCR test for this damn virus? So if a Brit dies of a heart attack today, but has a positive PCR test, he doesn't die of heart attack anymore as he used to.
Okay, but there is a vast discrepancy. I mean, I don't think the methodology for calculating whether people are dead or not is that different in Germany and Britain. I don't know, but we could check that out. But why? I mean, from my point of view, I've been arguing, well, it's the NHS has been run down, and care home people were pushed into the care homes. But what's the reason for the vast discrepancy?
What is vast, by the way?
I mean, 65,000 as opposed to 9,000 or whatever it is.
No. Sorry, don't accept this. Let's put it in deaths per million. All right.
Yeah.
So first of all, these 65,000. How many of them died really because of the coronavirus, and how many collateral deaths were there because these people did not enter the hospital in time because of the crises that in England had a far higher impact than in Germany. Mm-hmm. We know of terrible stories about British patients who had their heart attacks, who had their stroke, and were not properly taken care of because the hospitals didn't take them, or the hospitals, I don't know what. The whole healthcare system is not really good in England, not anymore. It's as bad as in Italy almost. But so, you have to reduce the number by those who didn't die because of this virus in the strict sense, but because of the measures that have been taken. And if you then reduce those numbers by, let's say, a factor of 2, you would be back to, let's say, 9,500 in Germany and 30,000 in England. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So
of which 20-something thousand were in care homes.
Yeah. So now let's put it like this. Take the number of deaths per million. How many people die in England and in Germany per million every year? What's the death rate? The answer is 1%. That's the approximate death rate in both our countries.
Okay.
All right, because the life expectancy in England is approximately as much as in Germany, and the whole, age groups are similar. So we're looking at, let's say, per million, 10,000 deaths in England and in Germany every year across all ages by all causes. Of these 10,000 deaths, it's like leaves falling from a tree. The tree has 10,000 leaves, and 10,000 leaves are going to fall in autumn. Of these 10,000 deaths, 4,000 in your country and in Germany will be because of heart disease, coronary heart disease, all right? About 3,000 will be cancer, and about 1,500 will be respiratory tract disease, pneumonia, 1,500. Now, if you take the number of deaths because of the coronavirus, and you take the simple numbers that have been reported, incorrectly reported, because we don't differentiate between from the virus and because of the virus, we are looking at 100 in Germany of those 1,500 leaves. 100, okay, of 1,500, which seems to be but if you realize that there are about 10 different agents that cause these 1,500 deaths, then we are absolutely in the normal range. In England, you have about 3 times more. So it's 300 leaves, which is a little bit much, but not so much that you should get alarmed, because among these 300 leaves, you still have the wrong numbers because of those that did not really die because of the virus. So you're coming down now to the realistic thing that everyone is saying around the world. These are the number of leaves that the waves of flu blow from the tree every year. That's why COVID-19 can be compared in terms of case fatality to a normal to moderate flu. No more and no less.
Okay.
The numbers are that simple.
And that interconnects with Puschel's argument in Hamburg that the autopsies confirm all the people had serious.
Of course. In fact, the numbers are lower than 100 and 300. They are probably about 20 and 60, or even 20 to 100. Let England have 5 times more than Germany. Then this time, this gust of wind, the corona wind, has blown 100 leaves from the tree of the 1,000.
Do you see this as a consequence of the influence of modeling and artificial intelligence on designing perspectives and analysis, or what's the reasoning?
No, these are the absolute death rates that you can look up.
No, I'm saying, why have they done this? Is it because of too much reliance on artificial intelligence and modeling, or like Ferguson's modeling methods?
Well, some people believe that modeling. Some people believe it, but we have always been very, very skeptical, especially of Ferguson, who has never been shown. He has never been right in any of his models, and he started modeling many decades ago, and everything turned out to be wrong. And this one has also turned out to be completely wrong. And as we know now in retrospect. I mean, it's time to sit down and think about things. Really think about.
In relation to what you're saying there, I heard you say, quoting the Aufführung, the leadership of East German in the old days, vorwärts immer, rückwärts nimmer, forwards always, backwards never. How do you go back?
You really have listened to the interviews I gave. You go back by saying, guys, sorry, this is American. I'm sorry. We made a mistake. We thought it was going to be that bad.
Right.
But now we realize, since the epidemic has now come to an end, we are going to retrace our steps, look at the numbers, and come out honestly and say, making a mistake is just human. Everyone makes a mistake.
Yeah.
And so let's take off these masks, take off all these stupid, harebrained measures, just stop everything and let's go back to work. Let's go back to work.
For example, you've worked in hospital environments, you've been teaching thousands of doctors over the years. When a project begins, I don't know the specifics, but let's say you've got a major project that your university is engaged in. It's not easy for them to change track.
Almost impossible.
So it seemed to me when you were discussing the other day about children in Austria, that it's almost impossible to put the clear argument forward because many people have different backgrounds as to why they've started to argue this particular case and the programs they began to introduce and all the measures they've taken. It's difficult to step back. So at what level does it have to happen?
It's the whole crisis has come to a point where especially you British, you've shown the world how to do this before. Stand up and say, okay, fair play is the only goal. If this whole society is in such a crisis, how many lives have been ruined? How many existences have you ruined, you politicians, experts? Isn't it time to say we're sorry and shake hands and let's close the case instead of keeping on and on and on with arguments that are becoming so ridiculous that anyone who still can think after these 6 months is bound to see through the whole game. It has to stop, and it can only stop if those who are responsible will take the responsibility and say, all right, we will turn around now and we will go back. I've been trying to say this in 2 countries where I have the feeling, my wife and I, where we have the feeling that people are really starting to move. One is Austria. So the Austrians are really starting to get up and say, so. And the other is Switzerland. Where we have a little bit of hope. Now, those 2 countries have the big advantage that they're very small, 8 million.
Yeah.
So I've been appealing to the Swiss to say, you Swiss, you have always been, the personification of courage.
You're massaging the egos of each nation.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to get at your ego because you have you have every right to be proud of what you've done in history. I don't think you should run the risk of having to be ashamed of what you're doing now, because if other countries overtake you, you're going to have a damn lot of reason to be profoundly ashamed of yourself, all of you.
Okay. On a wider historical note, you say the danger is the end of Enlightenment thinking. What do you mean by that?
Enlightenment, the age of Enlightenment, in German Aufklärung, that was the age, as you know, where the clever, educated, thinking people of this world said, man has to stop believing and start to go for reason, and in fact use the mind to conquer, what is it called? Aberglaube. Superstition.
Superstition, yeah.
You see, I'm a Thai. I spent years of my life in one of these countries with such low education where superstition ruled. You know, it's like the witch doctor in Africa, in the jungle. And superstition ruled Europe, the whole world, until the age of Enlightenment came. Said, don't believe everything. And now what has happened is that the age of Enlightenment has come to an end because everyone is believing this nonsense. As the Thais also believe it, because the Thais are born superstitious and have never been taught to do anything else but believe.
But it does seem to be that, although I understand where you're coming from with this educated, the educated should understand, it does seem to me that this is coming from the educated strata in society, that this is coming from, people are claiming the science is saying this and you're not listening. And if I say something, they say, are you a doctor? What do you know? As though you can't participate if you're not in that elite. What do you think about
that? I think it's an abuse that the elite are doing this. They are abusing their position and their power. And I think that they should have very, very, give the matter some thought, because they, one day, if they keep on like this, are going into the books, history books, but not as any positive personalities, quite the opposite.
Okay, some very rude questions, if you don't mind. Just because some people are circulating ideas about far-right conspiracies and God knows what, and they say that you must be somehow connected with far-right conspiracies and this sort of thing. So to make it, I just ask you directly, any link to Trump Brigade or right-wing conspiracy theorists or the AFD or I don't know what.
I don't know. My wife and I are completely unpolitical. We do not have any agenda. If you look at the interviews that we give, you will see that there's no political note anywhere, and we take great care to keep it like this. We don't take any stand, and the book is written in a completely neutral fashion.
Yeah.
I invite you to read it. We did not write this book for any purpose other than to inform the public.
Yeah.
And if people think or claim that I am rightist, what am I supposed to say to that?
I've got no idea.
I have nothing to say.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, I've come into enormous criticism because I'm a Marxist, I oppose the government in East Germany, but I am a Marxist.
Oh, so you're left and I'm right.
I've come in extraordinary attacks, accused of being a representative of the right wing and all the rest of it. I mean, so I can only imagine the monstrosities that have been hurled at you, because I'm completely unknown.
One of the last things that they said in Austria was that I'm like a sectarian, a
Sectarian.
Sectarian. I'm a sectarian. I would have replied, okay, but some people think that you guys who run around in masked as you are also sectarians. Or why do you run around like that?
One final question then. I heard a discussion yesterday from, it was some medical experts they met up in America and they discussed about what type of measures could be taken. And they were saying, well, the protection of the elderly, the protection of the vulnerable. I mean, there are categories of people who are the most vulnerable to this. What type of measures would you recommend that let's say, like my mother, for example,
My
is
mother-in-law, for example,
85 or something, what type of measures would you take
I
to
would
protect them against this?
just the normal
virus?
measures that have always been taken for these people.
Right.
Nothing more than the measures that should be implemented, of course, in care homes, of course. But let me, my last to you. You have to realize that for people under 70 with no, pre-existing illness,
Yeah.
this virus is hardly ever lethal. And so you cannot vaccinate a population that is not prone to die because of a virus, because you can never show that that vaccination or that vaccine is effective. You cannot reduce a fatality rate from 0.4% to 0.2% and say it's effective.
Sorry, one quick extra point, and that is there was a study in Belgium, I don't know if you're familiar with it, about hydroxychloroquine. They said that 200 to 400 milligrams is actually quite good as a result. And the same with vitamin D, there have been studies about that. What do you think on that sort of thing?
Well, I haven't seen the data, I haven't scrutinized the data, but I would be quite willing to believe that this is the case because it makes a lot of sense. There's a real reason why chloroquine could work. There's a scientific reason, cell biology, and there's no reason for me to primarily disagree. And I also have been an advocate of vitamin D, not only for this virus, but for all viruses, because as we know, every second North European has vitamin D deficiency, which is bad.
Yeah.
So I do take vitamin D every day. I do take vitamin C every day. I don't take chloroquine because I don't need it. I'm never ill.
Yeah.
But to end this, the elderly above 75 with pre-existing illness should be protected, absolutely. Those without pre-existing illness are similarly hardly prone to die because of this virus. We know of many, many people, 80, 90 years old, who have had this virus and almost we didn't even have to go to the intensive care department. We had a cough, we had fever, but that was it. It's just some normal things that happen in life, all right? Because there's this background immunity, I tell you. Okay, that's why.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your time and your work. I'm sure a lot of people in Britain will come around to buying this, your book, Coronavirus, False Alarm, with your wife, Karina Rees. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Goodbye.
Bye.